Good evening, everyone. This is Dr. Nikki Anthony, and I'm excited to share tonight. We have a really good segment planned for, especially for the women. It's for everyone because self care is for everyone, but we're focusing on the women tonight and the importance of self care practices and just moving forward with the best possible mental health as possible. So I have a very special guest. I'll get to her shortly and have her introduce herself. Tonight we are focusing on self-care, but as it's a part of Mental Health Awareness Month, and I'm excited. I'm really excited. So I'm going to jump right into our mission statement just to share a little bit about who we are as an organization and what we do. The mission of Little Hands, Big Hearts, Little People Service Organization is to develop little people into servant leaders who think beyond themselves for the greater good through explicit and intentional opportunities for character development, selfless service to others, and community based volunteering. And with that, we had a wonderful serve day yesterday. Just to highlight, we served 159 people, most of them unhomed and transient downtown. We gave away food, we gave away clothing, shoes, undergarments, all kinds of things, baby clothes. And so I'm excited about just the work that we're doing. Tonight is an extension of that work. We focus on little people, but those little people go back into families. They go back to moms and dads who are dealing with a lot. And in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, we want to make sure that we're providing information and programming that targets the whole family. So that's where we're going to go tonight. So, with that, I want to introduce, I'm going to call her my friend. I met her some years ago. I was training for Duval County Public Schools in trust based relational intervention, and she was a part of that cohort my first year of training DCPS social workers. And it started off a little rough, it was a lot that went on that year, but we had the best time with that group of social workers. So I saw her again last year. I think we were at an event, we crossed paths. She was like, "Erin, is that you?" I'm like, "That's me, that's me." And then I recently saw her again at another event. She's an AKA, and she can share a little more about that. But I'm super excited to have Miss Crystal Brown. Is you can see it's Crystalline, but I know her as Miss Crystal Brown, and she is a licensed clinical social worker slash psychotherapist. But you can call her psychotherapist tonight because she told me they mean basically the same thing. And so that's what we're gonna get into. With that, Miss Crystal, I would like for you to introduce yourself. And I told her to talk herself up. She said she doesn't like to. If she leaves out anything, as much as I know, I'm going to tell her, or I'm going to tell the business that I know. So, Miss Crystal, please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Erin, and welcome. Thank you all for having me. I am Crystal Brown. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a Duval County Public Schools social worker as well. I have been a school social worker for about 35 years, and I have been a psychotherapist probably somewhere near there about 30 years. I am practicing. I do mostly virtual. I have done brick and mortar, so whatever the need is, I try to meet it. Let's see, on a personal level, I have three children, and they are the love of my life. They are 27, 23, and 16. So keep me very busy. I'm born and raised here in Jacksonville, Florida, and I know that this is a broadcast that reaches all areas. I went to Florida State University for both degrees. I have my bachelor's and my master's in social work from Florida State. And what else, Erin? I think that's probably.
She is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha
Yes,
sorority.
I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and have been for about 38 years. So pretty much keeps me busy with my civil service organizations. And so I am glad to be here tonight. And I will try to answer all your questions as best I can and provide whatever information that I have to give to you and to be of service.
She's also a professor, a college professor. So she does
Oh,
do,
yeah.
yeah. So
I'm
she's helping. a groom.
I
just
wear
like
many hats, and I
you
do. I am a professor at FSCJ, and I teach in the Human Services Department, which is a 4-year program akin to social work. So I really enjoy that. And I'm also a qualified supervisor. I supervise interns who are seeking licensure. I really enjoy that because that allows me to teach one-on-one with interns. Let's see.
She has her own private practice.
Yeah, I do.
She do.
I
I
think
told you
that's
I'm gonna
it.
tell it. If you don't tell it, I'm gonna tell
You are telling it. I just can't remember everything that I do. I remember my son asking me, "Well, Mom, how many jobs do you have?" And it's
it.
not work when you love it. I mean, it's just what you do. It's who
Right.
you are.
Yeah.
It's what you walk in, and
Yeah.
so it's not work for me.
I
But
understand.
I guess I do wear a lot of hats.
You do. You absolutely do. So we will jump into some statistics. I'm going to ask to everyone who's viewing, thank you for tuning in. I'm going to ask that you share this broadcast. Let this reach as many people as possible because we want women. And self-care, like I said, is not just for women, but tonight we're focusing on women, but we want as many people to see this as possible. So hit that share button. But I want to start off with a few statistics that are especially related to women. And these might be a little alarming, and I want that to happen. That's purposeful because I want us to see why it's important for us to engage in self-care, right? As women, we are natural nurturers. Most of us, we take on a lot. We stretch ourselves thin, and in the end, if you are not a whole person, if you don't have anything poured back into you, you start to try to pour from an empty cup, and you can't do that. Mm-hmm. So the purpose of these statistics is to get you to see yourself and what the possibilities are if you don't take care of yourself. All right. So the first one is in 2022, almost 27% of women in the U.S. had a mental health disorder compared to about 20% of men. 1 in 5 women have a mental disorder compared to 1 in 8 men. Over a quarter of young women aged between 16 and 24 years old report having a common mental health problem in any given week. So from week to week, that age range is very susceptible to mental health disorders or issues. Research shows that 53% of women who have mental health disorders also have experienced abuse, some form of abuse. 1 in 20 women experience premenstrual dysmorphic disorder, PMDD, every month, about a week to 2 before their period, which includes symptoms of anxiousness, being on edge, problems with focus and attention, emotionally upset and teary, headaches, being overwhelmed, conflicts and tension, and muscle and joint pain. This is every single month. All right. 1 in 10 women experience postnatal depression upon giving birth, which includes or leads to problems with bonding with their children, withdrawal from others, problems with connection to others, worry, and a loss of enjoyment at such a beautiful milestone of giving birth at that time in their life. Women accounted for almost 70%, 69% of all mental health leaves of absence in 2023, and 71% in the first quarter, just the first quarter of 2024. In 2024, it was reported that women accounted for 60% of depression cases in our nation. And this is from an AFLAC report for 2024 and 2025. It was found that women reported for moderate or high burnout at 75% compared to 58% with men. So as you can see, mental health, all of those are statistics related to some form of mental health. Think about your workday, burnout, just going, giving 110% every day. And then when you come home, you don't have a lot to give to your family. All of these things matter. So we're going to jump into our questions. And the first question that we have is really, we just want to define some of this terminology. I want you to, Ms. Crystal, define stressors and then explain the significance of stressors and their impact on our overall mental health functioning.
Well, a stressor is anything that can cause strain or tension. So when we think about stressors, we typically think about those things that cause us negative stress. And is there such a thing as positive stress? If you have a negative, do you have a positive? Well, there are things like life events that can be positive that happens that are still stressors. So it is causing us some strain, some tension because it's an event that we have to pay attention to or it's something that we have to deal with. I think most of us are used to the common stressors, work, children who we love dearly, partners. Those things are common stressors that we think about when we say, what is stress? Uncommon stressors are those things that are uh, considered positive aspects, like say you're planning an event that's like a party, or you're planning a baby shower or something to that effect. Those things are very positive in nature in terms of when they happen, but for some people they can be stressors. So anything that causes a strain or tension in your emotional well-being is considered a stressor. um, like, for instance, today, I was very excited to be here, but I was a little nervous, and that caused me a little tension. So that could be potentially a stressor. So it depends on how you handle that in terms of how it impacts you and what the outcomes can be. So
That's good. So I remember hearing something. You could tell me if you agree or not, but stress, whether it's eustress or distress, from my understanding, those are the terms. Eustress is a good kind of stress. Distress is just what it sounds like, distress, bad stress. But they impact your body the same way. So your body does not, register eustress as, oh, this is good stress. We don't have to get nervous, or we don't have to, you know, we don't have to react a certain way. Your body is going to process whatever kind of stress it is the same way.
exactly, you're going to have the same feeling. Whether I was on a call earlier today and we were talking about anxiety and excitement. Anxiety and excitement produce the same feeling in your body.
Yes.
You might get that nervousness in your tummy if you're anxious or you're excited. You might get, your head may start swirling a little if you're anxious or you're excited. You might get sweaty palms if you're nervous or anxious or excited. So your body responds the same way to the to the terms that we have decided to place on the feeling that we're enduring. So to help you cope with that, when you look at a stressor or when you look at your body responding, you can decide emotionally and mentally whether or not that's something that's a eustressor or a distressor. So, we have the ability to categorize those things that are affecting us.
Alrighty. So we're gonna. I want you to define for our audience wellness and self care. So we've looked at the things that can cause our bodies to become dysregulated, our minds to become dysregulated, right? But now let's look at self care and wellness. So if you could define those, and then those will set the tone for the rest of our conversation about what we're going to get into.
So I had to take a few notes on that one because I wanted to make sure that I gave you everything that I had around wellness and self-care.
Sure.
So there are four areas that I think that we should look at. Of course, the physical, which is our health and diet and our exercise. Our emotional is understanding, your emotions and becoming self-aware, knowing where you are. Your social wellness and self-care is more like your relationships and your feeling of belonging. And your spiritual is whatever you believe that's bigger than you. So, we have physical, emotional, social, and spiritual areas of of wellness and self-care. Those areas of wellness, I this is just my personal opinion around those areas of wellness dictate how you self-care. Make sense? Okay. So we can have our discussions based on those four areas. Okay. All
Can
right.
you expound a little more on that, on what you just shared? Can you give a little
Okay.
more? Very interesting.
So in terms of the self-care,
Yes, how those four components basically dictate how you take care of yourself.
so with your physical, they're all intertwined, right? With your physical, the things that you do to take care of your physical self, your exercise and your diet, of course, is going to impact how your emotional self exists. So if you look at self-care for physical, what does that look like? Going to the doctor, making sure you know what's going on with you physically. Any new symptoms that come up, you take care of them. You eat well, you get enough sleep, you get enough movement. So your physical self you're taking care of your physical self. Your emotional self is understanding your emotions. And how do you do that? You become more self-aware of who you are and what your needs are. When you have
Mindfulness.
self-awareness, your needs become a source of energy, so to speak. But unless you are self-aware, you don't know where your energy comes from in terms of needs, because you're not aware of what your needs are and how do you meet them. So it's all intertwined together. And then of course your social, how do you function in your daily walk with the people that you are connected with your family, with your friends? How are your interpersonal relationships? And then of course your spiritual, in terms of what is this walk like and who is it with and how is it bigger than you. And your spiritual doesn't necessarily mean religion. Your
Right.
spiritual is your energy. Your spiritual is your connection with something bigger than you or something other than you. So take that term very loosely in terms of how you apply it, not have any bias around that. So having them all be connected in terms of self-care, you have to make sure each area is fulfilled. You have to make sure each area is addressed. Because if you don't, then, like you said earlier, that cup gets empty and you can't pour out. You're trying to have something poured in. If you don't have anything to give, then those areas suffer.
Yeah.
So.
That's really good. I think when you were talking about the physical portion, it probably applies to everything, all four of those components. What I heard was you have to be proactive, because you
Oh
talked
yeah.
about, like, the things like with your health, your physical health, you got to go to the doctor, things like that. And when you hear information that you don't necessarily want to hear, you don't bury your head in the sand. You become proactive about addressing it, about working towards change in the ways that you can do it on your own. And if you need to partner with your physician or whoever your doctor is, doing that. So I love that. And I guess that would be one of the points I make. I hope that women will become more proactive with self-care and with just taking care of who you are as a person. Like, you are not just someone's wife or someone's mom or the teacher or the whatever. You're a person before you're all of that. You are, and insert your name right there. You are yourself. I am Dr. Anthony. I am, let me take off doctor. I'm Nikki, you're
Right.
Crystal. And so beyond the titles and all of that, you are that person. So just be mindful.
Well, and if I could add to that, Nikki, as women, we often look at self-care as being selfish.
Yes.
And
Amen.
it's really not. It's
Yes.
really not. I am going to take care of myself so I can be there to take care of whomever I've chosen to help,
That's
and
good.
to take care of.
That's really
As women, we often feel guilty about taking care of ourselves,
good.
but it's not in the essence of being selfish. It's just making sure that you are getting your needs met.
That's really
As
good.
long as you don't cause hurt and harm to anybody, you're not being selfish.
That's good. That's good. And throw that in the chat. Self care is not selfish. Somebody throw that in the chat. Self care is not selfish.
It is definitely not.
It's not. So I want to kind of talk about, so when we neglect our own selves, our own self care, why do you think that we choose to? And you might have already kind of started going down this path, this path of the conversation. Why do women avoid addressing their mental health needs? And we can stick to self care, but I think it's just going to incorporate all of mental health, But why do we avoid that? Yes.
I think culturally we have been placed in positions of being the nurturer, of course, but we also have been conditioned to think that we will get what we need from doing that particular
Mm.
role. We will get all we need from our children. We will get all we need from our family. We will get all we need from our friends. And so it goes unsaid and it goes unaddressed as to what we actually need and want. But when we don't get those things, when our mental health and our self-care is not being addressed, then
Mhm.
of course another emotional roller coaster may exist in terms of feeling unappreciated, feeling like people are ungrateful, and
Mhm.
resentment builds in relationships. And so here again, it affects your relationships with your family,
Social, yeah.
because right, you're not able to be proactive around your own mental health
That's
and your
good.
self-care. Like I said, because I think culturally we've been conditioned to say we're going to get all of this from doing these things for other people
Mhm.
anyway.
Mhm.
And most of the times it doesn't happen that way. I think, as mothers and sisters and aunts and wives, we do get a lot of fulfillment from those
Mhm.
roles. We do,
Mhm.
not to diminish them at all, because I know I have and I did and I do.
Mhm.
But we still need more than that when we need it. And we need to be able to say that and it be okay to say it.
That's
Yeah.
really good. And something I've learned in my own mental health journey is that I don't think a lot of women really know themselves enough to know what they like. I don't know, for whatever reason, like a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to really learn themselves outside of what people think, outside of who they are to other people. As a mom, I'm a nurturer, I'm a such and such. As a wife, I'm a this, I'm a that. But just as yourself, who are you? What do you like? And I met so many women who don't have answers to those questions. They can't
Right.
tell you if they like to travel. They can't tell you if they like to go, I don't know, wine tasting. They can't tell you
Mhm.
any of these things because they haven't had an opportunity outside of, their the roles that they, I guess, consider premier in their lives,
Mhm.
to learn
Mhm.
themselves. And so I think that's I don't want to, I guess, unfortunate, but not in a condescending way. I don't think it's
Right.
condescending. It's unfortunate, but I think it can change. Also, it takes intentionality to change. That you can
It
learn who you
does.
are. You just have to be willing to do the work. Because she said, just like she said, culturally, and I don't think it's just Black women culturally. I think it's just, the state of how most cultures across the world are. Like,
Mhm.
women are seen in a certain way, So, if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to share.
Oh, I agree. I agree. Most definitely. Most women, we don't know what it is that brings us joy, because
Mhm.
we've gotten joy from things that are already predetermined for us. And not to
Wow.
say that's not a good thing,
Yeah.
it is. But when you are faced with what it is that you really need and you can't answer that question,
Mhm.
that becomes stressful. That's a
Mhm.
stressor.
Yes.
That in itself is a stressor.
That causes so much turmoil inside, so much
Mhm.
turmoil. So, who becomes impacted when we fail to address our mental health and start to practice self care? Who gets impacted by those decisions?
Everybody we come in contact with, because it's just like, we, I hate to say it, but Beyonce said it the best: we rule the world. And I mean that in the most loving way I can say it, is that
Mhm.
our hands are in everything. You know,
Everything. Yes.
everything is in our work, it's with our children, it's with our spouses, it's with
Mhm.
our spouses' work sometimes. Our grandparents, our aunts, our extended family. Our hands are in everything, and that is just the way we are wired, because our culture is like, and cultures across the world, women really are the foundations for families, and
Mhm.
we make everything happen. We put the
Mhm.
wheels in the motion. We make sure that things keep moving. So everybody is impacted when we look at our mental health, or don't address our mental health. So everyone is. I think I lost Aaron. Did I lose you?
What happened? All
There
right.
you are.
There we go. I don't know what happened, but keep going. We're going to keep it rocking.
Well, I was at the end, and I was, Aaron. Did I lose you? So
Okay. So a big part of self-care, I've learned, this is something I've learned, and you might have something that's bigger than this, but something that I found was setting boundaries. Setting
oh
boundaries.
yeah.
Um, can you explain boundaries and then kind of talk about why they are important in relation to self-care?
Boundaries are your limits.
Mm-hmm.
Boundaries are what you are willing to do or not do.
Mm-hmm.
um, and we all need boundaries, and this is a place that I find that women have a hard time setting boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
We acquiesce a lot in terms of being accommodating and compromising,
Mm-hmm.
which are two words that I think are necessary in the English language, but I think they apply to us more so than any other words in terms of relationships. And
Right.
when I say relationships, I mean
Intimate.
family,
Mm-hmm.
friends, spouses. We acquiesce and we accommodate so much until we lose our boundaries. We don't do the things that are good for us, because we're
Mm-hmm.
so focused on doing what's good for everybody else.
Yes.
And when we think that we do good for everybody else, then we'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not.
Mm-hmm.
It takes years to realize that, okay, I'm not okay. So
Mm-hmm.
boundaries are very important. And usually it takes some event for people to set boundaries, some cataclysmic, life altering event for them to say, okay, this is where I am with this.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened to me personally. I had a medical event, and I'm just like, I am reducing my stressors as much as I can. A boundary
Mm-hmm.
that I set for myself is that that sounds very selfish, but it's in terms of acquiescing and accommodating so much that it causes me distress.
Mm-hmm.
So when it causes me distress, it's not good. It's not
Mm-hmm.
good for me, which eventually means it's not going to be good for you.
That's right.
Because if I'm in trouble, you're going to be in trouble.
Right. 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 Right.
If I'm not whole, how can I do what's necessary to help you if you have a need to be whole? So
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense that in in my head, it makes sense that um, when we give up so much of ourselves to our families, to our work, we lose the very component of service. We lose the very component of being able to pour in. We lose
Mhm.
the very component of being able to help.
Mhm. That's good.
So you have to have boundaries. You
Yeah.
have to.
So
Yeah.
when I went through my own, I guess the inception of my own mental health journey, the first thing I learned was about boundaries, and just to kind of, I guess, add a little bit of something to it. Boundaries are not walls. So let me say that. And if you, I'm sure you probably recommend this book, but it's called Boundaries by, I can't think of his name right now. It's two doctors. Henry Cloud is one of them. And boundaries are important. They're not walls. They're not designed to keep people out all the time, because walls will keep people out, but they'll keep you locked in, right? But they're
Mm-hmm.
gates. So you think of the boundary as a gate. And as long as people are willing to honor those boundaries, like she said, they're willing to not breach the boundaries. So if you said you can't talk to me this kind of way, if you said, this is what I need to be to feel safe, and that person is doing that, they're honoring the relationship in that way, then the gate is open. Come on
Mm-hmm.
in. Come on, let's sup together. Let's be friends. Let's be whatever. But as soon as those boundaries get breached, we close the gate. And I can still see you. I can still wave to you, but you don't have access like you once had. So think of
Mm-hmm.
boundaries in that way, that they're a gate and not a wall. Um, and they are just a part of being safe. So just keep that in mind. They're a part of being safe.
And
Right.
there are some people that you have, family is really difficult to create boundaries with, um,
Yes.
because they're going to always be there.
Yeah.
But you have to create boundaries with your family, particularly because they are always going to be there.
That's good.
Especially, those relatives that, you know, seem to always be the ones that need attention.
Mm.
So they will they will breach your boundaries to get that attention, but you have to be steadfast.
Yeah.
Even with families, you have to
Yes.
create boundaries. Yeah.
Yes. And I love that you brought that up, because sometimes that's the hardest, especially for women. Not my kids, not my husband. Yes, them,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
them.
Them.
Set the boundaries. And I think if you tackle the big fish, like if you tackle Goliath, everything else becomes easier. So if your
Exactly.
Goliath is your family in any kind of way, once you learn how to safely set those boundaries with your family, doing it at work, doing it in your friend groups, doing it in your sports league, whatever it is that you're attached to, it's not going to be so hard in those areas once you do it with the people who mean
Mm-hmm.
the most, and probably you would have the most hurt or anxiety, trying to set those boundaries with. So just keep that in mind as well. Um, so as we begin to work towards, sorry, I'm losing my questions. I'm trying to multitask. As we begin to work towards ultimate unapologetic self-care, something that we have to do is learn how to get our recognize what our needs are. Can you share some ways that women can work towards getting their needs met? So not just knowing what they are, but work towards getting the needs met with the people that they're connected to, or even individually.
So one of the things that I've learned, when I had my brick and mortar office and I had clients come in, and I saw a lot of women, and I've had a lot of conversation with women about their needs and how you convey what it is you need. Particularly, most of the time, it was from their partner or their spouse. We often tend to think that people can read our minds. If we talk in terms of assumptions and suppositions, and well, if I say this, they ought to think that. Mm-mm. That's a no, because we cannot assume that the other person understands, number one, how we're feeling about said issue, and two, what it is we need from that person about said issue. So you must be clear in what it is you're asking for in terms of a need. You also have to be mindful that this person or these people that you're asking this may not be able to do that for you. So not everybody can meet every need that you have. Most needs need to be intrinsic, number one, in terms of how they're met. But when you are in a relationship, there are expectations there. So when you have expectations and you're trying to get needs met, you need to be very clear and direct. Don't suppose that anybody can read your mind or assume what it is you need. And even with children, I find that when I'm talking, especially to my 16-year-old, he'll say something and I'll assume that he meant X, Y, and Z. And he's like, no, that's not what I mean at all. And I'm like, oh, okay. So even when we talk to our children, even our friends, we must be clear in what we're saying and what we're hearing them say. So the first and foremost is be direct in what your expectations are.
That is so good. I love that. I love the example you gave about kids. I think if you could talk to a kid, learn how to communicate clearly, it might be a little easier with other people because kids are so honest. Like you said, your son said, that ain't what I'm talking about. And you're like, oh. And I know for me, being in the classroom, trying to understand students with disabilities, intellectual disabilities. Miss Anthony, that's not what I said. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, well,
Right.
Bring me up to speed. What did you mean? Help me understand, So going back to that clear and that direct communication. I love that.
Well, and we must understand that people hear things differently as well, because we're used to communicating one way in terms of, like I say, assumption, and can make leaps. There are people that are very direct and literal. And I am fortunate enough to have 3 of them close to me. I have 2 of my children and 1 very good friend. When I say they are so literal that I have to remember, they are going to take what I say at face value. And the things that we make assumptions about culturally, and when I say culturally, I mean just in westernized culture, black or white, green or yellow. People who are literal, they don't make that leap like we do. And if I have 3 of them in my life, in my personal life, just imagine, in a professional setting, or imagine in, a setting where you are perhaps an employer and you have, 200 employees. And, there are people that do not communicate the way you do. And so you need to make sure you understand that. It matters. It matters. You have to know how people communicate in order to be able to communicate with them.
That's good. That's good. This might be off the wall, but I guess like communication surveys, learning your style of communication. Would you recommend those to people who are trying to, learn, I don't know, just how to interact, how to develop stronger relationships, how to strengthen relationships they already have? Would you recommend those to anyone?
I would recommend anything that is going to help you learn and grow.
Okay.
But you have to be willing to do that. Yes. You have to be willing to say, okay, I may be the one that's not understanding.
That's good.
And that's self-awareness. That in it, I had a friend of mine, he thought that he was a great communicator. He thought that he was easy to understand. And we had this thing that, every time he would place an order or go through the drive-through, the person on the other end would be confused. And they were like, why I said, because it's not clear to what you're saying. But, in his head, he was like, I'm clear. They don't understand. But time and time again, it was the other person. And I'm thinking, maybe you need to look at yourself and how you're communicating. So that is the hardest thing for us to do, is to look at ourselves and say, okay, maybe we're the one that is not being clear. Maybe we're the one that needs some self-awareness around how we communicate. That's a hard thing for people to do, though, to look in the mirror and say, I might be the one that needs some change. Yeah.
That's very hard. And I think because it begs on us to be mindful of ourselves. So mindfulness is another part of self-care, being mindful, because you have to look at yourself. You got to dig deep. You got to be honest about who you are and who you're not, and a lot of times we have put ourselves on a pedestal. Oh, I'm a great communicator. I used to say that, not realizing that the way that I thought was good communication was really me like lashing out at people. I used to always, and this when I was younger, I would, if I got mad, like instead of speaking up along the way, I would wait until things hit a head. Then I would just lash out. Very immature, very, very immature. But it wasn't until I went through counseling or therapy, that I had this revelation. Like, that's an immature way to handle people. If you do life with people every single day, why can't you communicate with them? And if you get to a point where after you've had regular communication, if you get to a point where they're still not hearing you, that's something different. But when you refuse to speak and then you lash out, that's on you. And that was a hard realization. So I started to learn how to have hard conversations when they were necessary. And I know for myself that my relationships got much better, much, much better. Are they 100% at this level? Most of them are, but there's always room for growth, so I leave room for growth. So I would encourage you, do the work, be honest with yourself, wherever you are, whoever you have relationships with, be honest. And I want you, if you can go back, you said know who can give you the things that you need. If you could kind of just really, really expound on that, because I think that's something I had to learn, that we have expectations of people, and sometimes those expectations, are misplaced, because that person doesn't have capacity to give you that thing. So if you could kind of lean into that a little more, because I think that's part of your self-care too. You won't be beating your head against the wall thinking that this person's supposed to do this and they don't know how to do that. So,
and that thing that you need from them, you may not get it from them, and as women, we often lean on our mate to give us everything we need. Women pride themselves on saying that, my husband or my mate is my best friend. Well, sometimes they don't want to be that, and they're not that, and you think that they are, or you think your best friend is the one that can give you, the emotional support. You got to look at the relationships and see, are you really getting what you think you're getting from this person? And you have to look at people's capacity to meet that need. If you are a hugger and you want hugs and you need that physical touch, but this person, that's not who they are, you're going to be frustrated. You're expecting that person to give you something that they can't possibly give. If you need somebody to help you problem solve, and they are operating in the stratosphere of, oh, we'll just deal with it when it happens, they can't give you what you need.
Right.
So you have to be realistic in who you're asking what to do, and a lot of times we're not, because we think that people that we have chosen, because other than your family, you choose everybody else, your mate, your friends, you even choose your work people because you chose that job. The people that we've chosen, we think that they are like-minded like us. And so sometimes we have a hard time figuring out that they're not. But can you get what you need from that person who is not like you? Yes, of course you can. Of course you can. Now, you might have to tailor that a little bit and do some self-care around that, but that person can definitely be a part of that self-care ritual or that self-care means of getting that need met. I'm sorry?
I said, so good. Keep going.
Oh, okay. Sometimes, we look at people and we put them in a box, and we think that they ought to be able to create that situation for that box and give us that every time. And that's just not the case.
Mhm.
So nonetheless, can you get what you need from the people in your life if they're not like-minded like you? Of course you can. But you got to have some realistic expectations around what they can do. And
That's
the
good.
rest of it, you have to find another way of getting it met that
That's
does
so
not cause hurt and harm. Yeah.
that's good. Thank you. Clean it up. Help the people. Krista Brown, help them. So I want to talk about something that's important for you to begin engaging in self-care, and that is self-compassion. A lot of us are. I have one of my sister friends. We were talking yesterday, and she was just sharing some things, and I was like, "No, you're gonna give yourself grace because we handle
Yes.
ourselves so gracelessly,
Yes.
so harsh, you know." And she's kind of talking through her issues, she's problem solving. I was like, where's the grace in it? Where's the grace? And that's something I had to learn for myself. So if you could talk about self-compassion, and then kind of jump into why it's important as an aspect of self-care.
So believe it or not, y'all, Aaron gave me the questions ahead of time. So when I looked at this question around of compassion, I said the same thing. Giving yourself room to make a mistake
Mm-hmm.
is grace.
Mm-hmm.
But more importantly, giving yourself grace to approach forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And I say approach because forgiveness is a process, self forgiveness. You know, um, we are our own worst enemies.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we come we're very hard on ourselves when we've hurt others, or
Mm-hmm.
when we've done things that cause hurt and harm. You have to be able to give yourself grace.
Mm-hmm.
However, grace does not come without being aware and learning.
That's good.
You have to learn from the mistakes that you've made. If
Yes.
you've caused hurt and harm to yourself, hurt and harm to others, grace comes and forgiveness comes with growth and learning and
Mm-hmm.
knowing why you engaged in whatever behavior that you engaged in. But self-compassion is is definitely necessary just in daily walks,
Mm-hmm.
because I have had clients who are very hard on themselves just with normal everyday activities, not something that they've done in terms of hurt and harm, but just maybe they didn't uh, listen to their 10-year-old when they were talking about what was happening at school, and they feel very guilty about that. The compassion that comes with being a mom, the compassion that comes with being a wife, we have all those things for other people, but where is it for yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Here again, self-compassion is not selfish. It's just making sure that you leave room for grace
That's so
and leave
good.
room for the process of forgiveness to take place.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. And I love you leaving room for yourself to grow. Like that's part of our
Mhm.
mantra: lead, serve, grow. So everything that we engage in, all the things that happen, if you're not growing from it, you're doing yourself a disservice. Number one, you should be growing and becoming a better version of yourself as a result of those experiences. But that's something that I know I had to learn because I just was so hard on myself. This
Mhm.
perfectionist attitude. So many of us, and y'all be real in the comments if y'all have struggled with that as well, that perfectionism, thinking that you have to get everything right. That was one of my biggest struggles. And I remember my dad, when I was younger, he would tell me, he's like, you're not going to always get it. You're not going to always get it
Mhm. Mhm.
right. You ain't going to always get it right the first time. Sometimes some things are going to take time because you have to grow into it. And as I've gotten older, he was right. I was angry when he was right, but he was right.
Mhm.
But I can see my growth in learning how to rebound. We talked about resilience a few days ago, how to rebound from those hard situations, those adversities,
Mhm.
and those challenges, and keep moving forward. So I'm a stronger person mentally, emotionally, than who I
Mhm.
used to be and how I used to be.
Right.
So I just encourage people to engage in that self-compassion. That is one part of self-compassion, is realizing we have common humanity. Everybody makes mistakes. You're not the only one.
Mhm.
You are
Mhm.
not the only
Mhm.
one. You made that
Right.
mistake. Go ahead. You want to jump in?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to add that so many of us, and when I say us, so many of us women
Mhm.
have experienced trauma that has created a emotional incompetence,
So
a
good.
delayed response to life, and there's a fine line between having self-compassion for yourself and remaining a victim, so to speak.
That's good.
um, we have things that have happened to us that are horrific. They are, and you have to allow yourself some grace and some compassion around being emotionally competent to handle life. But you don't get to stay there. You must grow, you must learn, you must do the things that are necessary to developmentally become emotionally competent. Because
Mhm.
if you don't, you repeat the cycle. You repeat the trauma, you repeat the hurt.
Mhm.
So learning from that is paramount in terms of self-care. We When I had my practice, I had so many women come through who had experienced trauma and not knowing how to handle that and be compassionate
Mhm.
for themselves, and to give themselves grace and to give themselves forgiveness around a lot of the things that they had done as a result. You don't get to always blame your trauma, but you must certainly understand how it impacted you,
Mhm.
how
That's good.
it impacts you, and what you need to do to make sure that it doesn't further impact you and the
Mhm.
people that are in your lives. So there's a lot of things that go into being self-aware, and all this self-care starts with self-awareness. Your
Mhm.
emotional competency starts with self-awareness. Your ability to become a better version of you starts with self-awareness. Unless you know who you are, where you are, and how you got there, your emotional competency, it remains stagnant, so to speak.
That's good.
So it's very important to be self-aware.
So good. So good. If you're getting something, I don't know, put me too in the chat, or I am, or something in the chat, because this is I'm learning. So excellent conversation. Thank you for sharing with us. So let's get to some strategy, because we can highlight the problem and all of that. We can
Hmm.
tell you, like, this is what you got to work on, you got to fix, blah blah blah. But what are some strategies for me to work towards self care, right? So thank you, Rowena. Ronna, okay, and Terry. We got some people in the chat. So, what are some low cost or some free things for the person, the woman who is starting on their self care journey? They don't really know. A lot of people think you got to start big. I love traveling. So, your self care becomes, I'm going to Africa, in a week. No, that's not realistic, because every time you need self care, you can't hop on a plane and go to Africa, right?
Right.
So, what are some low cost things or some free things that you can engage in, or that you would suggest that women can engage in to begin practicing regular self care?
You know, I thought about this, and we all say, do things like take a walk, go to the beach, um, find a sport, engage in an activity. But you really have to know what it is that brings you joy
Mm-hmm.
first. Because, if you're going to the beach and you don't like the sand, that's not going to be relaxing to you. you know, you got to know. Like, I like the beach,
Uh-huh.
I like sand, but I don't like dirt. I'm not gardening, but I will
Mm-hmm.
go to the beach. There's a difference between sand and dirt. You got
Yes.
to know the things that bring you joy. I have a friend, she can work in her yard from sun up to sundown. I'm not doing that. It sounds good. It sounds therapeutic. So you have to know who you are and what you like. Self care, self care for me, a low cost, no cost thing. I love to wrap up in my blanket and watch binge TV. Now, there's a difference between watching binge TV and just kind of dumping your mind and being free and just coasting through the day, as opposed to binge watching TV and you all sad and depressed and you just don't want to, you want to be closed off from the world. The same activity, two different reasons.
Right.
So you have to find the thing that brings you joy. There, with the world of social media, there's so much you can do, and you don't even have to leave your house. So just really be honest with what you want to do and what brings you joy. For me, I'm gonna tell you, it's really doing nothing. Because I have so many balls sometimes I'm juggling. Nothing sounds really good to me a lot of the times,
And that's okay. I
It's
think like
okay.
that's the thing. Like when you find your thing, even if it doesn't make sense to anyone else, she said time and time again tonight, as long as it doesn't hurt you or hurt anybody, it doesn't have to make sense to other people, right?
It does not. It
You
does
just
not.
need to do what you know brings you peace, that brings you to this place of homeostasis and equilibrium, and something that brings you into the green. Miss Crystal knows what I'm talking about. You can be in the blue, you can be in the red, but we want to get to the green. The green is where I am regulated. My brain is able to compute and think and process. It's online. I'm not in distress. My lid flipped, all of that. So you have to do what brings you peace and joy. Right.
And I know for a lot of us, taking care of our physical self, our beauty is important. But if you go to the salon and you drop a couple of $100 and that couple of $100 is going to stress you out, you're not really self-caring. You're not. So think about it. In the moment, it might feel good, but but if you have a couple of $100 and that's what you want to do, and it doesn't cost you an additional, go for it. But just be mindful and self-aware of the things that you're doing that doesn't necessarily cause you more stress.
Oh, good. So self-care can be and probably should be practical also,
It should.
So just keep that in mind also. What do you practice to the audience? What's something that you practice or will begin to practice for self-care? Throw it in the chat. And it's because we are at the end. I told you I'm going to keep you right at an hour. So I would like, if people had questions or if they were interested in your services, is there a way that they could contact you to learn more, to hear more? And I'll
The
put it
best
in
way
the
is
chat if you have
email.
Email?
With my email address, yeah. That would be the quickest and the best way. You more than likely will get a response immediately. So Crystal Brown, LCSW@yahoo.com.
Gotcha. All right. So do you have any final words? What's your example of self-care? I know you said binge TV.
I just have this new mantra of living the best version of me that I can. And part of that is I have this new, I shouldn't say new, but it's a concept that I just walk in love and light. I try to, not let anything stress me out. I have this meter, 0 to 5, and I try to stay up under a 1.5. So if I get over a 1.5, you got my attention, and it's causing me a little stress, which stresses me out because I'm not wanting to be stressed. So I have redefined my purpose in terms of who I am. I just try to love deeper, love wider, love more. I try to be more patient. I make sure that I address people by their names. I I talk to everybody that I can. I say hello to the person that doesn't want to say hello to me. Just loving deeper and wider. And that has created a sense of armor for me. I call that my armor. People tend to think that an armor is walls, like when you were using with the boundary. It's not. The love that people have shown me, because I in turn have loved them, has created an armor for me to get through whatever it is I have to get through. It's the love that comes from people that, creates that sense of strength for me. It's the love that creates that sense of toughness. It's not being tough. It's letting that love in and letting that light shine through that has really created an armor for me. And there are things that I didn't think that I could even manage to get through, but I have gotten through because of love and light and just being there for people, being of service. And it has come back to me tenfold. And so that, that is my strength. That is where I find my self-care, is when I give more. And it's not necessarily doing more. It's just having that mindset of giving more. And that's just my love and light. That's just where I am. So if you're trying to create a better version of you and you're trying to create a sense of self-care, know who you are, know what you need, and give more of that to people, and it will come back to you.
Love it. I love that. That's beautiful. Miss Love and Light. Very beautiful.
Thank you.
So we got some great examples. Christy Lynn says she's going to try to figure out what brings her joy. And I love that. You don't always have to have it right off when you're learning. You just explore. If you find, even the things that you find you don't like, at least you were diligent in trying to figure it out, so you weeding out stuff. Carla Kelsey. Hey, Miss Carla. She says she's going to take more time for herself. And then Rowena, hopefully I'm saying that right. She said more facials and massages. And giving more. She loves giving more. Yes, I like that too. That's part of my life work is servant leadership. So for me, let me see. It used to be journaling. I think I used to love to read, and I after you go through and you get so many degrees, it's hard for me. Reading has become hard for me. It's not aesthetic reading anymore. It's like different reading for information, and it's like, oh, I don't want to do this. So reading is not as pleasurable as it once was. So I love the beach, and really I recharge. I don't think people know this about me, but I am an introvert. So when I have to people too much, one of my recharges is just to be around my parents. I love to be around my parents. So, yeah. So thank you. I have really enjoyed tonight. I hope that the audience has as well, that you got something from it. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you for having me.
I'm glad that you said yes. I'm glad. Yes. She's like, I don't know. I got some technical challenges. I'm like, lady, we're going to get through this. So let's go.
I could not say no to you, Erin. I could not say no to you. Saying no never even entered my brain cells. So
I really wanted us to do like a breathing strategy or something, but we'll save that for another time. We'll save it for another time. But I encourage you all to just begin practicing your self-care. Take yourself seriously, love yourself, and take care of yourself. Take care of you, for the people who are attached to you, but just take care of you because you matter, matter, right? Do you have any final words?
Well, if I could say one thing about the breathing,
sure.
It's really not the breathing. Okay. It's the counting. It's a distraction. Because if you think about it, you're breathing, if you go, it's the count. Because they teach you when you're having a baby, but whatever. It's the counting. It's anything that can distract you from what it is that's causing the stressor.
That's good.
So count.
Good.
Count.
Yeah.
Count. Right. If you're stressed out, start counting. And I tell you what, you will come down.
Wow. All right. Y'all heard it from the guru tonight. So with that, I want to encourage you. This next Sunday, we'll have Mr. Monty King. Miss Crystal recommended him, and I've had the opportunity to talk with him just a little bit, and I'm excited for him to share with the men. We'll be talking from the topic of men cry too, because I think for a lot of men, mental health is a taboo, and they kind of stick with the stigma of, you just don't say anything. I'm strong, I'm tough. And men have a lot that they have on their shoulders. So we want to make sure that we're addressing the men, the fathers, the husbands, the uncles, the sons, the nephews, because there are some really alarming stats out there for men who do not engage in appropriate mental health care as well. So we'll be talking with the men. So invite a man that you know to join us. It's going to be really good. I'm excited. And if you are local, we would love to have you serve with us. We have some college tours coming up next month. We'll be going to my alma mater, University of South Florida, and we'll also be going to Valdosta State University, and this is for our kids. Part of what we do is educational exploration to learn our post-secondary options. So that's what we'll be engaging in next month. We also have our end of the year celebration to honor our first cohort for completing a service year, 2024-25 service year. So many community service hours amassed, so many projects that we did this year. We visited a couple schools this year. I think we got 8 schools, 8 universities under our belt this year. So we did a lot, and we're going to celebrate. Ms. Christy, you are more than welcome to come. I would love for you to come. So those are a few announcements that we have. If you're not following us, follow us to stay abreast of what we got going on. And with that, I hope everyone has a wonderful night. And thank you for joining us. Share this broadcast with everyone that you know. And y'all have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.